Today on Yeti at Large, a roadside install of our Sumo springs on our Alliance fifth wheel. Thanks for coming along and helping out. Hi, and welcome to Yeti at Large. This is a channel focused on making the most out of what you have, no matter where you're at. Thanks for tuning in and helping out. To show how simple it is to install a properly sized Sumo spring, we're going to do it on the side of a remote Arizona highway. But first, let's talk about what it's like driving in the fifth wheel without Sumo springs.
You'll see going over speed bumps, front axle, rear axle, trailer axle, without any kind of dampening. Obviously the speed bumps are a pretty extreme example, and trailer axle. So this is a very smooth piece of state highway. We've got a brisk crosswind, and the sensation of driving with the pogoing, the shimmy front to back. It's an acceleration byproduct. I'm at 55 now. That was a smooth acceleration. For purposes of disclosure, we're about a mile high, so it affects the performance of the truck a little bit. Bridge bumps, and then you feel the reverb of the unchecked spring action. Now this MoreRide 3000 suspension system has an equalizing link in the center with the small bushing. I said in the first video that it wasn't specifically designed for dampening vertical travel, but it is an effective engineering device to equal the load between the two sets of leaf springs front to rear. This makes a more uniform compression and extension of the leaf springs. There is still only a champagne cork-sized bushing in there that's just meant to dampen the travel of the leaf springs a little bit. By adding the Sumo springs, the anticipation is with the proper amount of preload that it will control that vertical travel of the axles and the leaf springs, assisting the MoreRide 3000 without, again, changing any numbers or any active suspension remedies like pneumatic shocks or airbags. The sensation is palpable though. This is a very smooth road, and here I am kind of pogoing and bouncing my way down the road. And this is a good suspension setup. Granted, I know a lot of people are going to the fully independent suspension. I view that as unnecessary and cost prohibitive. It's my hope that in a few minutes, the traveling sensation will be largely different.
While we're going to do this install on a remote section of highway, we're going to avoid working on the shoulder of the road. I will not work on a vehicle on the shoulder of a road at all costs. It's just too dangerous. So there's a great spot here to get a little ways off the road. It's level and it's going to be a lot safer. Please don't stop along highways if you can avoid it, even if it means ruining the tire. It's certainly not worth an accident or an injury. As we get turned around here, we're in a pretty remote location, so this is a great place to demonstrate how simple it is to install this product. You saw in the intro that we have all the tools with us we need. I went through the instructions very carefully and ensured I had the right wrenches and sockets. So let's get parked, let's get the truck safe, and let's get to work.
So we are in a tow configuration. We're hooked up to the truck. We're parked on a fairly level surface, and we have done a lot of the pre-measurements on our install, so we know that the width of the stack plate is going to be acceptable for the mounting bracket here. And then we have our spring height. And here's the thing, without taking any load off of the frame to the axle height, this fits in here perfectly snug. So I am of the impression, knowing that I want a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of preload, and each one of these spacers are a 1/2 inch, I feel that one spacer on here is going to give me the optimal amount of preload to set this up to function most effectively. So, knowing that I'm using one spacer, I will be using not the longest, not the shortest, but the middle one. And I'm just going to start it like that to leave it set aside.
Now, I travel with both blue and red Loctite, liquid and tape, but for the purposes of the install, I use the included blue Loctite for the bushing spring retainer nut. The nuts on the end of the clamp are nylon impregnated, so they don't require blue Loctite, but they're a very good product. I learned quickly that I needed a deep well 14mm 6-sided socket to sink it all the way and to set the torque properly. A note of safety: never lift the wheels of one of these leaf spring type suspensions off the ground by the frame. It will cause the links to change their orientation. If you have to change a tire or lift a tire off the ground, do it by the axle, and that way you retain the load on the spring. Your 2 leaf springs and that leveling, stabilizing link in the middle should look like a W. If they don't, you'll need a technician to correct that for you. In that spirit, and because I'm on the side of the road, not in a garage where I'm removing the tires, I relocated the jack as close to each install point as possible, and only lifted it the bare necessary minimum amount to get the spring in place. There is plenty of side-to-side and front-to-back adjustment on that leaf spring stack plate and the spring itself. So, once I confirmed my measurement was equal on all 4 axles, I did pre-assemblies on the springs, which made the install much quicker, and then we went through each of the 4 axles, working quickly but taking our time to make sure that each spring was ideally located for its individual position.
These are the electrical brake lines that run up inside the frame, almost vertical from the spring stack. They're not going to be in the way of the bumper, but I did move them about another 1/2 inch just to make sure I've got good clearance, and I can feel that they're not going to be sitting on those anywhere. So I think we're good. Boy, the wind kicked up and I'm getting blasted with the sand.
Even though we're just repeating the same steps on the remaining corners, we take nothing for granted, and we spend some quality time inspecting all the other systems, fasteners, bushings, and equipment.
Woo! It is blowing out there. So what I was saying underneath the trailer is, once your install is done, go back around and check every connection and every fastener, nutting and bolting it like Jesse James would say. Once you're satisfied that your install is good, set yourself a reminder on your phone, in your calendar. Try to time it the next time you take the rig out, but regardless, go back and revisit your installation. Confirm the torque, look at how things are bedding in and wearing, and really make sure that you're ready. We'll report back about how everything did, including our Sumo springs. Whew! Let's go road test these. And here we go. For the purposes of comparison, I'm driving the exact same stretch of highway. volts, 210 degrees. 65 psi, shifting nice. Instantly, there is a noticeable absence of the chucking and the pogoing. Now, honestly, before it wasn't a complete deal breaker, but it was noticeable. And now, all of a sudden, it just feels much more connected and predictable. Remember, I'm in a pretty awful crosswind right now, and these are even helping with some of that sensation. Having a lot of experience with closed cell urethane It reminds me of a Nestle candy bar. Picture little air bubbles trapped inside of the chocolate. Those were delicious. I loved those when I was a kid. But that air squeezes in there, and it's different sizes, so it gives it a progressive rate, meaning the further you push it, there's an increase in the dampening. I believe we've got the right amount of preload, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch, and we've got a good install right on the frame. Oh, this is exactly what I was hoping for. Again, it's not going to change the numbers on the truck, but boy, it's sure going to increase the comfort, and that means a decrease in fatigue and a little predictability. Anybody that's ever towed a fifth wheel or any kind of trailer, you're used to looking straight down that line, and you can see what kind of sway and wobble and chucking and pogoing and shimmy and all of that other stuff that people would use to describe the play in a trailer. I hope you can see what I'm seeing. She is straight.
And so, wouldn't you know it, we had a situation on our test drive. When I'm towing with the RV, I never exceed 65. 62 to 65 is my ideal speed, and I more than typically double the space in front of me. A couple miles from my exit, I'm feeling pretty good about things, but I noticed this BMW with its hazards on, following a truck that was poorly loaded. This gave me concern because I'm always worried about debris on the roadway. A single piece of strap iron can cost you $1,000 on an RV in a blink of an eye. So emergency braking brings out the least favorable characteristics in my suspension by loading that pin weight and making the truck unbalanced. Sure enough, you watch a lot of debris fall off the back of this truck. The BMW swerves out of the way, which I can't do, but I jump on the brakes and go from 56 to 11 miles an hour very quickly. I found the handling characteristics of the truck and fifth wheel greatly improved because of the dampening of the Sumo springs. So now that just leaves 2 more tests left on this drive. The next one are the speed bumps. While they're very slow motion, they really articulate the suspension, and they show you the difference of dampening to control that pogoing and that rebound. Look at how the Lynx walk and then recover immediately compared to our drive out video where they pogoed for several seconds afterwards. That's a huge improvement. Now that I have Sumo springs on all 4 corners of the fifth wheel and on the truck, I'm very much enjoying the response. The last test we're going to conduct is, do these springs allow the axles to articulate in tight cornering, or do they bind up the axle, thus inhibiting the side-to-side and front-to-back motion of the axles under tight cornering conditions? I watched very carefully, both on pavement and on gravel, and I found the axles were still comfortably walking forwards and backwards and side to side without tearing up the underlayment on the RV. So I don't see where these springs interfere with my ability to park, to navigate speed bumps, to emergency brake, and they certainly improve the comfort and the smoothness of the ride at freeway speeds. Now, like I was talking about earlier, you can see how important it is to take those preload measurements from a hitch height on a flat level surface, because as I put the lowering jacks down after my install, you can see that it lifted the frame off of the preload portion of the Sumo spring. And since it's reasonable that every campsite will be different, and the only constant will be your hitch height when you're connected to your tow vehicle, take those measurements there and ensure they're consistent. And don't take for granted that all 4 corners are going to be identical.
So at the end of this video, I think it's worth noting that the single most important component of any RV is you. And any damage, any malfunctions, or any shortcomings from this unit are likely going to come from me, the operator. With that in mind, be careful, slow down. Think more about how you use it and what you want to add or take away from it. There are a lot of great accessories out there to improve the RV experience. I have carefully selected super springs. I put them on my truck and they're the sponsor of today's video. They made this possible, and I'm very grateful for that. This is an excellent accessory, mostly because with their help, I selected and chose the proper product for this application. The next video coming up will be a 17-state, 5,500-mile torture test in a few weeks. Please stay tuned for that. We'll do a long-term road test on these Super Springs and some of the more ride and Lippert accessories we've had, and basically give you a full follow-up. Thank you so much for coming along and helping out. Please do all the YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe, and journey better.